Hello. Hey guys, welcome to our Zoom session. Did you have any questions about the project specifically, or are y'all just here to see if anybody else has any questions that might help?
I had a question.
Okay.
Um, so I saw on the project where it said like you need files of your or PDF files of your registration for your business and everything. I own a business and I have all my files such as like my registration from the from the state secretary, um insurance policies, all those that whole. What else would I possibly do?
Okay, so for the project, I don't want you to use anything that's like it's for your real life business.
Mm.
You'll be, of course, at a little bit of an advantage because you have familiarity with, maybe forms or documents or whatever in the past. But for this particular project, I want you to form a new pretend business under Georgia law. And your project should reflect what you've learned in the chapters. So, when you go through the chapters, for example, sometimes students get to chapter 16 where they learn about sole proprietorships and partnerships. And they're like, oh, those are easy. I'm going to form one of those. But the goal is that you learn in 17 and 18 that there are better options for you to form that give you more protection from liability. So in other words, on this project, a sole proprietorship or a general partnership are not going to do well in the project because they're not the best choice for this academic exercise of how can I best protect myself in a simple way correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then on the instructions, I've very specifically narrowed your focus of what websites to use in order to keep the projects, concise to a particular timeline, just the, legal formation of the entity, and to keep the focus more narrowed because, of course, like just cutting you loose to do anything and everything could, produce any number of local, like city or county documents for business licenses or this permit or that permit. And so on the instructions, I'm really specific. The only websites for this project that are, authorized resources, obviously like Coursera, your textbook, and me, I'm an unlimited resource, for questions and information. But the outside resources are limited to the Georgia Secretary of State's website, the IRS website, and then the OCGA, the official code of Georgia. And so the reason I do that is so that people don't sort of get carried away making the scope of the project too broad by visiting, websites that are not authorized, like the Department of Labor or Department of Revenue or local and county ordinances and those kind of things, because you understand it could get much more complicated with exactly the kind of things that you're listing with insurance and those kind of things. So I'm just looking for, you formed an entity that gives you good protection, right? So like chapter 17, 18 choices are typically going to be better than chapter 16 choices with that. And, very specifically for the project, everyone, no matter what kind of entity they're forming, will turn in a cover letter for the first page. That makes sense. That introduces me to your concept for a business, tells me what kind of entity you formed. It's me, I made this kind of business, it's an LLC. Or I made this kind of business as a corporation, right? And then I want everybody to include 2 pages that represent going through the motions of formal business records. So one of those pages would be a checks page showing me the fees that were required to create your business. And then the other page would be minutes from your first meeting. So meeting minutes from your first organizational meeting, however you want to title that. But it's going through the motions of those formal business operation skills that you keep records to help secure that corporate veil. So if someone did try to sue you and say, oh, you're a sole proprietorship, you're not really an LLC, you can produce these records of, every time I had a meeting, I kept this record and made note of what we decided and what we did. And they're signed and they're dated and they're authenticated. And therefore they help secure that protection, that corporate veil protection. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. Your Zoom just says iPhone. It doesn't have a name for you. So
Michael.
Michael. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. It said I don't know why it has two. It's just, but it's Michael.
Oh, okay. Well, does that help you, Michael, with that kind of thing? So yeah, so I'm looking for that, those corporate records, those two things, cover letter. And then I'm asking everyone to produce a governing document that you made on your own. So the governing document is the document that is not available like as a fillable form or a government form or something like that. It's a document where you take what you learned in the textbook and you apply it to your business idea. So continuing with the LLC example, because LLC is a really popular choice in real life. And therefore, this is, an academic exercise where we're pretending to create a real life business. So therefore, it's a very popular choice for the project as well, because LLCs are relatively simple to form and they give you that same protection bubble that you want around your business and yourself. And so for an LLC, the governing document is your operating agreement, for example. So when you look in chapter 17, which is the chapter that talks about LLCs and stuff, there's a section in your textbook that I believe it's in 17-2 that says the LLC operating agreement, and it gives you half a dozen typical topics that would be covered in your operating agreement. How is it managed? How do you divide profits? How much can go out in profits, or how much do you want to retain to grow the business, those kind of things. And so that's what you're going to develop as your governing document. It's a contract basically between you as the owner to your business on how you're going to run it. So that document created by you would have like just a simple title at the top. You probably want to number all 6 of those topics, like, paragraph number 1 or article number 1 might be management, article number 2, etc. And then at the very end, you want to close it with like, a line with the date, like executed on this date, or these, this operating agreement goes into effect on this date, something like that. And then a signature section that would have your signature, your printed name, and then showing the authority that you had to, create and execute this document. You'd indicate your capacity for signing. So your capacity is your role in that business. As an LLC, an owner of an LLC, as you recall from your reading, is known as a member. So you would sign your name, member of whatever your LLC is. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
what I'm looking for that. And you'd want to do that on any documents you create, and you'll see it even kind of built in on the form. So like if you're looking at the Secretary of State's website, where they have forms, and you know what, I can pull that up actually. Let me share my screen and I'll pull that up, and just instead of just telling you about it, I can just show you what I'm talking about. Right? Okay. That's better, right? Okay, so you can see my screen now that I'm sharing, right? This is from the Secretary of State's website. I just followed the link that said forms. And when you follow that link, it gives you a list of all these PDF forms that are available on the website. Obviously, this is way more forms than you'll need. For example, like continuing with the LLC example, we're looking for like 3 of these, really. And so a good place to start for information, like as you're researching, they have a section right here with filing procedures. So if you see, oh, I'm going to create a corporation, you can click on filing procedures for corporations. And it's a 6-page document that walks you through, the minimum requirements by the state of Georgia to form a corporation. If you're doing an LLC, you can click on filing procedures and it runs you through, the minimum requirements in Georgia to make an LLC. If you do just what's on this form, that's the minimum to pass, the project. You won't get 100 on the project, but you'll get a passing grade on the project if you follow the minimum requirements. For some of you who just joined a little while ago, what I talked about a minute ago, with there are specific requirements. I'm also looking in addition to the minimum required by the state. I've asked you all to do a cover letter, for example. That's not something you'll see on these instructions from the state of Georgia, clearly, cover letter to your teacher. And then I've asked you to go through the motions of creating good business records. And so 2 pages of your project would be reflecting, good business record keeping. 1 page would be your checks page that shows, record keeping for financial transactions and keeping your finances for the business separate from your personal finances, for example. And so for creating this business, there's going to be fees associated with filing, with the state of Georgia, or reserving your name, for example, or paying an annual registration fee. And so that's what I want to see on the checks page. Like, it could be a clip art check that you pulled out of, Microsoft Word or Google Documents, or you could do a chart. But what I'm looking for is, who did you pay? What was it for? Like, why did you pay it? And how much did you pay? Does that make sense? Like, for the checks. And then the other business record document I want for you for this project is like your meeting minutes, some kind of record of your very first organizational meeting that you had for your business. So again, that's getting into that habit of keeping records of all the meetings when the owners of the business met, even if it was just you and you're a single owner of the business. You met on this date, you did this thing or that thing. What makes sense at this very initial stage of the timeline. Typically, like, for example, while we're sitting on the LLC, one thing you do in your very first organizational meeting might be to adopt your operating agreement. So that's your governing document that you're creating for this project. For an LLC would be your operating agreement. If you're a corporation, your governing document would be your bylaws, for example, as you read, in chapter 18 or chapter 17, depending on what kind of structure you're doing. But so those are the things that I'm requiring. And then when you go through any of these kind of documents, it gets down to the bottom, and I don't know if you can see it very clearly from the shared screen, but at the bottom of these filing procedures, it gives you other important information. Well, I've limited what websites you can use in order to keep the scope of your project narrowed. So when you look at this stuff, you see, suggestions for the Department of Revenue and the Department of Labor, in Georgia. You can completely forget those bullet points because those are not authorized websites for you to use. So you ignore those links. However, the very top link talks about applying for an employee identification number and gives you a link for the IRS website. That is a website that you're authorized to use, specifically because I want everyone to turn in that application for an employee identification number from the IRS website as part of the project requirements. So you can follow that link, or you can just go to the IRS website yourself. But when it comes to that particular application, please, please, please make sure you are using the PDF paper version of that application. The IRS does not have a fee associated with applying to get an EIN. An EIN, think of it as like a social security number for business. Like you have a social security number as a, identifier for you as a individual. It's an identifying number for businesses. And if you fill out that application and you apply for one, even though this is a pretend business, for a project in your legal environment class, the IRS may very well issue you a real life EIN number. And so I don't want you to be in the position where, someone from the government is expecting tax revenue from this great business you're about to start when it was really just for a project. So nothing for this project should be filed in real life. Nothing for this project should cost you any money. When I'm looking for the checks page, I'm looking for pretend checks for pretend fees that you pretend paid, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. We'll go back to the Zoom call. So hopefully, Michael, that addressed your question with that stuff. Welcome to the rest of you that have just joined. Does anybody else have any other general questions, specific questions?
Well, how should the order be?
Okay, the order can be whatever makes sense for you. It's not like I'm going to take points off if you file, this form in front of this form or something like that. But ideally, the cover letter makes the most sense to be first. So I'd really like to see everyone have their first page be the cover letter. And then the rest of the forms would make logical sense if they're in kind of a timeline basis. So for example, one of the documents that everyone's going to turn in would be a name reservation form from the Secretary of State's website. It doesn't make sense for that to be like your page number 10, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be page 2, but it should probably be earlier in your project because that's when it happened, was earlier in your timeline. Something like your checks page, that could go anywhere. That could go right at the front, it could go at the back, you could put it in the middle. A record of your organizational meeting. If you're one of the things you're doing in your very first meeting is adopting your governing document, then that governing document would make sense to be like right before, right after those meeting minutes. Because timeline together.
And if we're doing an LLC, how exactly is there like exact number like of like papers we should have like as like a cover letter, and then we have like our business meetings and then our checks and like all that?
I mean, kind of like I would imagine your project's going to be in the range of like 8 to 12 pages.
Okay.
I think the minimum you could probably get everything you need to get in would be 8, but some of these things might be more than one page. I don't really want you sharing things on a page, like, one page for your checks page, a different page for like your meeting minutes, a different page for, your governing document, but some of those things might be more than one page. So if you're drafting a governing document for your LLC, which would be your operating agreement, maybe it's 1 page, maybe it's 2 pages. Your cover letter, maybe you had a lot to say in your cover letter went onto a 2nd page, or maybe you did your checks you did clip art checks and it turned out to be 1 clip art check on 3 different pages, that kind of thing. But if you're drafting your own documents, I would expect it to be less than a dozen pages. The problem is if someone doesn't read the instructions carefully and they plagiarize their governing document. So they go online and they do a Google search for bylaws, or they do a Google search for an operating agreement, and they download someone else's work and try to submit that as part of their project. That's when we end up with projects that are like 30 pages long, because it's legalese in a contract that, they just typed in their name and attached to the project. So that's what I'm trying to avoid by, hammering home, like only use the authorized resources I've given you, only go to those websites. That will keep you focused on just the things you need to form and create this business under state law and what I require for the project, instead of getting too carried away with a lot of extra forms and documents that are not necessary for the project. I'm not going to count points off for something that would be like optional extra, but you will get points taken off if you include extra documents that are improper or inappropriate. So for example, you're forming a brand new business. So if you include anything with like the word amended, like amended annual registration, that's an improper document because there's nothing to amend yet. Your business is just barely being created. So what would you amend? For example, that would be a document that I would take points off for including. If you include something that's optional but not necessarily required for the project, that's not going to necessarily hurt your grade at all. It's good. It's extra. I'll look at it and I'll give you feedback on it, but I'm not going to like hurt your grade for something that you did that was a little bit extra. That's a good thing,
So if I just did like the cover letter, the name reservation, the checks, the meeting minutes, and then employee identification, is that enough?
No, because that didn't include any of the forms for the state of Georgia.
Or like and then the filing procedure thing from the LLC, like because I did an LLC and then so all 5 of those, and then the filing procedure.
Well, okay, so that thing I was just showing you on the Secretary of State's website isn't a form. That's just filing instructions. So I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen again because I still have it open on my computer, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Whose question was that? Was that Michael or
Kai?
I didn't. Kai. Okay. Okay. So on this, let me zoom in a little bit since I'm sharing the screen. On this page right here, I'm still open to that filing procedures for an LLC. It gives you the minimum requirements in Georgia, but it suggests the forms that you're going to want to use for these minimum requirements. So the first one it has is right here. It's your name reservation form. So there's one form that you'll want to include in your project from this website if you're doing an LLC. The next paragraph talks about preparing articles of organization. Okay, there's a second form that you will need to track down on the Secretary of State's website to include with your project. The articles of organization, I'll scroll to the bottom of this document. this is a sample articles of organization that you can like cut and paste into your Word document that you're working on for your project. And you can fill this out for your business, and that's perfectly acceptable for articles of organization. An alternative to that is on that list of forms that we just saw when we got to this form was a template for articles of organization. And in that template, it's a fillable PDF form, just like the name reservation, where you type in information about you and your business, and it produces articles of organization for you in the template. I'll accept either one of those. I'm just looking that you created articles of organization. In real life, I'll just give you like a side tip, because part of my goals for you with this project is to empower you that this is something you might actually be able to do in real life if you have an idea and you have a very limited budget. Like, I want to empower you that this is the kind of thing you could do on your own to get yourself started without having to find room in a tight budget to hire someone to fill these forms out for you. So what I liked about this sample that's in these filing procedures is they have room on your articles to include information about the managers of the business that are part of the LLC. And the template doesn't include that. But what I like about the template is it includes a line that it says these are effective immediately or effective at a future date. And I think it's good that they address that issue. So if you were creating your own articles for your business, I think it would be awesome if you included suggestions from the template and suggestions from the sample that they give you here. And you'd have, 3 different articles to address them. But you don't have to go through those hurdles for the project. You can cut and paste into your Word document from here, or use the fillable PDF form from the Secretary of State's website. And then the third form that's indicated in these instructions right here is the transmittal information form. And so that's another fillable PDF from the Secretary of State's website. You just find the right one, fill it out. And, you can print to PDF and merge those PDFs together. You can print it in real life and scan it all back together with your cell phone or a scanner. Or you can fill it out completely and take a screenshot on your computer screen, and crop it, paste it, blow it up on a page in your document so that, as we're turning through the document pages, this one is one you typed, this is an image of a PDF, the next one's one you typed, like that kind of thing, so that it looks,
Okay.
it flows, it looks professional, that kind of stuff, but you didn't have to use any fancy software. You literally just put a screenshot in. If you're doing the screenshot method, I highly recommend that for your final version, you save it as a PDF. This is just a tip for real life, for practical purposes. Whenever you're sharing a document with someone or to someone that they don't need to edit, it's always a good idea to save it as PDF, because that locks everything in place. That way, if someone has a different version of Word, or they're switching from Word to Google Docs or to Pages or something like that, on a MacBook, having something saved as a PDF keeps all your pages formatted exactly the way they looked on your computer, no matter whose computer is looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, while you're still working on the project, it doesn't make sense to save it PDF, because that locks it in place before you're done editing. So wait until the end, but
So basically we just need to go on the website and look for all these forms and fill them out.
Yeah, so that's part of the research that you'll do. So your foundation material for this project are the 3 chapters. And so make sure you always start with, reading through the chapters, doing your MindTap homework. When you look in that section of the major project, I have a PowerPoint slide that is called Overview of Business Entities. And it's all 3 chapters combined into one PowerPoint. And as you scroll through that PowerPoint, you'll see slides where there's like things that stand out in bold or red or whatever. And it's like, for your project. And I have like, tips and hints and things like that, how these things might apply to your project for different entities that people might be working on. So you definitely want to make sure you don't overlook that PowerPoint, because it's got instructions kind of built into it for that stuff too. And then of course we talked about the checks page. These filing instructions, they call out all 3 fees I'm looking for on that checks page. So right here, when you read the name reservation paragraph, it says, boom, a reservation fee of $25 should accompany that request. So that should send off a flag in your head. You're like, okay, there's one of my checks right there. And then as you read these next 2 sections, they talk about filing fee of $100, 110 for paper. I'm not going to count off if you do $100 instead of 110 or whatever. I'll look for just a filing, that fee listed on your checks page. There's a second fee. There's your other check on your checks page. And then this last section talks about annual registration. There's no corresponding document for this because in real life, they'll just automatically generate it at the Secretary of State. So I don't need you to create something that is going to be automatically generated, just like, a utility bill or a receipt or something like that. That's how automatic it is. And so I just want you to include in your checks page, though, that you're aware that this annual registration fee is an important part of, every year, no matter how new or old that business is, like between January and April, in order to stay registered and stay, this legal entity, they need to pay an annual registration fee. So by including that fee on your checks page, you're aware that that is an important fee that you need to do rather than having to pay a reinstatement fee to get reinstated if you get dissolved for not paying your annual registration fee.
And is there any examples you have to that we could look at for if we need a guidance to how our project should look?
Not really, because so much of it is just fill in the blank form.
Okay.
That's how the project. So really, that's essentially what you're doing for your project is the research component of figuring out what forms from the government you need.
Okay.
And then the application project of applying what you learned in the book into a governing document. When you flip to your chapter 17 and you read about what an operating agreement is and what it should include, taking those 6 suggestions and creating a essentially a contract between you and the business, like how it's going to run. You put a title, operating agreement of your LLC, and then you number those paragraphs, just like when we saw I'll show you what the template looks like. It's still sharing my screen, right? You're still with
Yeah,
me?
I can still see it.
Okay. So a filing template for articles of organization, for example, we had that sample in the filing procedures of a sample of articles of organization. And this is a template that is a fillable PDF. So I wouldn't need page 1 included in your product. That's just instruction page. But right here for page 2 on, this website is a fillable form. It'll take you 2 seconds to fill this out, right?
Yeah.
The name of the company, you check a box, you put today's date or whatever date you're completing it, and print your name and then check your capacity. So it's not super complicated. That's part of it, is finding this form. And then the other part is completing it correctly. That's why when you look at the grading rubric, how it's divided, 20% of your grade is based on making a good choice of entity. A good choice meaning this is a business law class. I want you guys learning how to protect yourselves. So I'm looking for an entity choice that protects you to get those 20 points, that 20%. So that could be a really easy 20 points to earn or a really easy 20 points to lose, but it's a really important 20 points. And then the next chunk of 70 points is just divided into, did you find the right documents and include the right documents you needed? And then the quality and accuracy of the documents you included. So I'm not going to count off twice. If you forgot to include articles of organization, for example, you don't get points missing because you didn't have it and quality points because it didn't exist. I'm just going to take the points off because you didn't have it. And then the remaining points will be divided amongst the quality of the documents you did include. So, for example, on this document, whenever it's asking for the name of your company, did you use the full legal name of your company? Or is your company name legally deficient because you forgot to add the LLC at the end? Same thing on the name reservation form. It's a relatively straightforward, not complicated form, and it's asking for 3 preferences, like 3 name variations. Did you fill all 3 out? And are they all 3 a full legal name that has that ending, that LLC ending or Inc. ending if it's a company or corp, or some kind of ending indicating what kind of business you've created? And then right here for capacity, when you read in chapter 17, you read about LLCs and what the owners of an LLC are called. And did you check the right box showing that you're the owner of the LLC? Some of these roles are potentially hired roles. You're an attorney in the company, or you were a hired organizer or something like that, or you're a hired manager, but member is what we call the owner of an LLC. So if you're the owner, you're the member. And that is a higher authority figure than any of these other roles. So that's the box that I would expect you to check for the project. Does that make sense? And that's how it's
Yeah.
these forms. And then of course the forms you create yourself, like for example, your governing document, which would be your operating agreement, you're going to use the content from chapter 17, those, 6 suggested provisions. Those will be the topics that you address in your operating agreement. Like one of them is management, for example. So you would have your title, it's a Word document, it's a page of your project. So you title it like operating agreement of such and such, whatever the name of your LLC is. And then you're going to have numbered paragraphs. It can say paragraph 1, or like the example right here, you can use this kind of as a template example where it says article 1, article 2. Your operating agreement can be set up like that too.
Mhm.
Article 1, article 2, article 3, 4, 5, 6. And then at the very end, it should always have, some kind of line that has the date and execution. So you could use this kind of wording from this example: in witness whereof the undersigned has executed these, and then you put the name of this document, which would be operating agreement, on blank date. Or you could just say executed on this date or signed on this date, something that just indicates that this isn't a draft. This is the actual binding agreement, right? And then the signature section would be signature of a name, printed name. And then you always want to include on these documents that have legal binding effect, the capacity of the signer. So you are, while we're talking about LLCs, you're the member of the LLC. So you want to put your name and then that you were member of such and such LLC. And then for the signature, since you're doing all this yourself in like a Word document or Google document, if you want to print and sign because you're already going to scan them all together at the end, that's easy. That's fine. If you weren't planning to print them at all because you don't have a printer at home or whatever, just use a font that looks like a handwriting font in Word, or use your mouse to kind of draw a squiggle to represent your signature, just something like that, so that it's clear this, again, that what you're submitting would be for pretend, but it would be an already executed operating agreement for your business.
Okay. And so for the operating agreement, you said we do a paragraph and describe for each one.
There's 6 different topics, so each topic should be covered in its own paragraph. It doesn't have to be super long paragraph, like lots and lots of sentences. It just, whatever it takes for you to address that idea. The activity is taking you through those motions of thinking about those concepts. What are you going to do about profits? What are you going to do about owners? How do you take on new owners? Are you going to be the one that manages it day to day? Are you going to hire someone else? Like thinking through, conceptually what you imagine the small business you're creating would actually look like. Because again, I want this to be an empowering exercise for you, but it also is an assessment of your learning. This is assessing how much did you learn from these 3 chapters? What did you learn? And how can you apply it? So it takes the place of an exam. I really hope that it's more fun than an exam. Obviously exams are just, they're a beast that's part of the process, but this project is, weighted the same as an exam because it's an assessment that reflects your learning for these chapters. Instead of having an exam covering these 3 chapters, we do this project instead. But I hope that it's more enjoyable for you to, assess your learning and show me what you've learned about this stuff. And again, it could be, if it's empowering, and it could be the start to you, if you have a big dream and a cool idea and, you want to start a business, it could be the way to protect yourself to get that business off the ground and up and running. Definitely want to encourage that entrepreneurial spirit in all of you. Go back to the Zoom room from sharing my screen. Anybody else have more questions along those lines or different questions? I see something in the chat box. Sorry about that. If you've been waiting a long time in the chat box, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat box. Okay. Okay, so to answer Haley's question, yes, you are allowed to create a fictitious LLC member if you don't have a partner. If you are creating a fake partner, I would love it if you put that in the comments that or give them a super obvious fake name, like call them John Doe, Jane Doe, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, like something that's obviously fake. Or just let me know when you turn it in on the assignment Dropbox, there's, you know, a place where you can put comments in addition to uploading your file. It'd be great if you let me know that the name of this fake partner is your sister or your best friend, or it's a made-up name or whatever, but it's not another student. Because what happened is I'll write down the name of your partner thinking that maybe this was the partner you had on the project, and I will like go through all my class lists and I will scroll through trying to figure out if they're in another section, because I let you guys partner up if you choose on this project, right, with up to 2 other people. But I don't require any of you to pick a partner on the project, because I know that for some students, you know, group work can be really complicated because you're busy, you've got a complicated schedule, or you commute, or you live on campus and you don't want to commute, like all kinds of reasons why group work can be a challenge. And so for my class, at least, I leave that choice up to you. This project is easy enough to do by yourself. But if you'd like to work with a partner or two for the camaraderie or for helping to bounce ideas off each other, like that's fine as well. But since I let you cross over between my face-to-face class or my online class, or across campuses from Noonan, my class, or Carrollton, I may not know who your partner is or which class they're from. And so I'll be hunting all over the place trying to find them to give them the score of the project, and they're just a fake partner that you made up. And then to answer Angie's question, okay, so for the transmittal form, their slots for registered agent or organizers. Okay, so under the organizer section, you're the owners and you're acting as the organizers because you're filling out the paperwork for yourself. So you'd want to put your partner's information on those lines for organizers. As far as registered agent, you can, you know, be your own registered agent. You can use like pretend to use a registered agent in your community that's available. Like it's usually going to be somebody that's a representative for the business owners, you know, like they hire a firm or an attorney or something to be their represented agent. So you could use a fake one, or you could make it be you. Either one is fine.
For those the checks and meetings, can you say how you wanted to look again?
Okay, so those 2 pages for your project are representing the formal business, you know, record keeping kind of things that I want everybody to know are important. When I have been in like real life law practice, one thing I've seen with small business owners that is kind of sad is when they have, you know, bad habits where they're too intermingled with their personal life and their business, and someone's able to pierce through that corporate veil, and they don't get, you know, they lose out on maybe bankruptcy protection, or they're at, you know, personal liability for stuff they wouldn't otherwise be liable for, or those kind of things. And so for all of you, you're my students and I care about you. And so I want to like treat you, you know, like future business owners and teach you the right way so that you guys are never in that position where it's really sad that someone was able to, you know, punch right through that corporate veil and be able to like get at your assets, or you're not able to seek protection or something like that because of not doing that. So what I'm asking for is 1 page for your financials. You know, financial record keeping is an important part of the formal business records. So your checks page would have, you know, like we were talking about LLCs, you know, there's 3 fees that I'm particularly looking for. So that would be 3, you know, clip art checks with who'd you pay, how much did you pay, what was it for?
But that's the main thing I'm asking. Where can I like get the printout, like the layout of the check, so I can just type it in? And
you can stick a clip art check in from Word, or that's one thing that I had mentioned in the announcements from a few days ago, that like, that's not, when I say don't use outside resources because that's plagiarism and academic dishonesty, I'm not talking about a clip art check. I'm talking about don't use outside resources. Like don't go Google sample operating agreement, sample bylaws, and, you know, download someone else's governing document, slap your name on it and turn it into your project. That's what's going to trigger, you know, turn it in software. That's going to trigger, you know, a plagiarism flag. And that's what I don't want you to do. But you can Google search for a check clip art if you want to, or sometimes depending on which version of, you know, Microsoft Office you're using or Google Docs, whatever, there's sometimes clip art searches built into your, you know, document software, and you can just search for clip art that way. Or you could make your own fake check by drawing a rectangle and having a two, pay to the order of and a fake signature at the bottom and a little box for how much money goes in it.
Okay.
Checks aren't something that people write a lot of for their personal life, but they're still something that businesses still use a decent amount of checks, printed or written, to again track money and payments. So something still alive and well in the small business world. And then of course for your business record for your meetings, that page would just be meeting minutes. You can title it meeting minutes for such and such LLC, and it's going to be a record of whatever happened at your first organizational meeting. So you had a meeting, like if you're a single member LLC, that's another thing to answer Haley. I don't think Haley's on here anymore. Actually, she just logged off. But to answer Haley's question is you don't have to make up a fake partner. You can be a single member LLC, and that's perfectly fine in real life and for the project. You're getting all the protection of an LLC, and you still have all that same flexibility that you'd have for a sole proprietorship. So that's why I discourage you from setting up a sole proprietorship for the project. You don't want to lose 2 letter grades because that decision did not protect you at all from legal liability. And since it's a business law class, that's an important element of assessing what you learned. But as single member LLC, being this kind of hybrid form, you get a lot of the same perks of ease and flexibility that you do of a sole proprietorship, but you get that protection. And, for taxes, you can get, taxed through your normal personal income tax, Schedule C, like that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of benefits to that LLC type. And when you're filling out your EIN application, which is the PDF version of the SS4 form for the IRS, make sure that you also download the instructions for that document, because that document is a federal form, and federal forms can be a little, I don't know what the right word is, maybe a little bit misleading. They look like it's really simple, but it's actually more complicated than it first appears. And then some of it just looks kind of goofy anyway. This particular federal form, normal things go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Well, this form has like a 1 and then a 2, then maybe a 4 and 5A and 9A and B, and like all these like letters with numbers, and the numbers don't go down in certain order. Sometimes they go across the row, sometimes they go down. So by using the instructions and downloading those from the IRS website, it's a second PDF file that you'll download separately. So you could print it out or just have it open on another tab. It will take you through general instructions on the first couple of pages, and then it takes you line by line on that form and tells you for all the different situations how to fill out that form exactly. So if you're a corporation, if you're an LLC, if you're a partnership, if you're a sole proprietor, if you're anybody that needs an EIN for some reason, it tells you which boxes to check and how to fill it out for your situation. So it's very helpful. And there's some things that are dead giveaways whether students use those instructions or not. Especially tying to an LLC, like one of those numbers, the way they answer it immediately lets me know whether or not they use the instructions. And it's not just about skipping questions, it's just about how to answer it specifically for an LLC.
So is it okay if I basically just do as of what I think is right now, and then show you it, and then you look at it and tell me, make sure I have the right things? Or
yeah, if you're going to send me a draft to look at, just send that really soon, because
yeah, I'll probably give it to it'd be either if it's not tomorrow, it'll be the day after tomorrow, maybe the day after that, but it'll be real soon, within the next couple of days.
Yeah, I would say I would, in order to guarantee review, I mean, I don't know what I will or won't get next week, because you still have another week till your project's due, but I would say in order to guarantee feedback and review, I would need them definitely by tomorrow.
Okay.
So that gives me time to catch up on reviewing them and stuff, because it does take me a little while. And the more I have, the less, in depth I could be with feedback. So, obviously the benefit to getting some feedback before it's due is you fix whatever you might have done wrong and get those points back. So they're not points you actually lose on the final version, right?
Yeah, but I should be able to get it to you by tomorrow or the day after that.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, the trick is getting to work on it as soon as you can after this call before you forget what you just thought you wanted to know, How about the rest of y'all? Any other questions that I didn't cover? Well, I guess if that covers everybody's questions, then I'll let y'all go early, but I'm glad you were able to join us. Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate that. Of course, I want you to all be successful in this class. So I'm always here to help you do whatever you need to be successful. But, the design of this project is to empower you for real life. So the better you learn this stuff for real life, the more useful it might be in the real world. So I hope you guys have a great day and good luck with all your projects. And please don't hesitate to send me an email or a text. I still have some drafts I'm reviewing. So if you're waiting on feedback for a draft, I apologize for the delay. I'm getting to those as soon as I can, but I hope you guys all have a great day. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with for your projects. Bye.
And then we were just trying to find LLC stuff to fill.
Uh-huh.
That's where we got like the foreign one, and we were like, we did.
Yeah, you don't want to go through the whole list and
Right.
just look for the word LLC
Yeah.
because
That's,
you're forming a brand new business. So some of those will be forms for like changing something. So if it's a form that has you amending anything,
Mhm.
that's wrong
Yeah.
because nothing exists yet for you to amend. If it's a form that is asking you to, or it has the word foreign in it, like you're not
Right.
foreign,
Right.
that doesn't apply. So when you're looking at that kind of stuff, like just kind of keep that in mind. But that's where those instructions are helpful. And then reading through my instructions, like where I give you that timeline, like that's helpful for like, yeah.
Okay.
So, making sure you start with your, name reservation through your first organizational meeting. Like those are also like check marks for like what needs to get done. And then the governing document, that's one that y'all have to write yourselves. That's the operating agreement. And this is helpful for that.
Well, very well.
Yep. So you're creating an LLC operating agreement. And there's your recipe. These are common provisions. So,
Yeah, and that's what when we create, so.
Mhm.
Right now.
so when you're creating something yourself, you want to give it a title.
Right.
You want to
And also-
number the provisions, kind of like, that other document we had like Article 1, Article
Mhm.
2, Article 3, like give it a heading, little numbered provisions.
Yeah.
And then like anything, you want to have this section bottom that has like date and signing. And since it's a governing document, all three of y'all would sign that.
Awesome. And then we should come out with 4 and 4, so.
Mhm.
And then the 4 we need that we do ourselves are that one, the checks.
So I think the only thing we did right, if I signed with that one cover letter,
Yeah.
is
Meetings.
cover letter meetings.
And we need those other 2 we gotta do ourselves.
Yep.
And so we need to cover letter, Mary, there's a checks over our LLC meetings, we need to sign the check, we need to get a like check thing.
Mhm.
And then
Operating agreement. Which is that thing she just showed us.
And I'll be here tomorrow and Thursday this week. So if y'all want to move by and ask any questions. And welcome to our Zoom call, Haley and Lexington. How are y'all doing?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Good. So what can I help y'all with today?
So I really just have like questions like, so I guess to start, like, how many pages are we actually supposed to have for this project?
It depends. There's not really like a set number of pages, just because if you have different entities that you're forming, you'll have different documents included in different number of pages. So like, I mean, you'll have, roughly probably like 8 to 12 pages typically for a project. Does that
8
help
to
a little bit?
Yeah. Let me see what my second question was. Sorry. Okay, so when we're actually like looking at these documents, finding the PDFs of them, you actually want us like to copy and paste the PDFs from the website onto our document and fill it out from there, or
No, you'll want to fill it out directly on the website. So on the website, those documents are going to be fillable PDF forms, like the ones that are on government websites, like from the Secretary of State's website or from the IRS website. You'll be able to open up that document and type directly into it. And then once you've filled it out, that's when you either want to like print it to, scan and combine it, or do like a screenshot of the completed form to paste the image into like your Word document or something like that. Or you can do like file and print it as a PDF, like the completed version, and then use like PDF merging software to like combine those into a document together.
gotcha. And so after we do all that, like we don't have to type nothing, I guess, like on the paper explaining what it is. You'll
Right.
just
So for that particular page, you wouldn't, because you would just like paste it and zoom it in, and that would be like, say page 3, and then page 4 might be something different, and page 5 might be something else. So your project would be a combination of pages you've created and pages of document forms that you've included.
gotcha. Okay. And by pages you created, you mean like the cover letter and things like that?
Right. So like a cover letter, maybe a page with like your checks. You can use clip art checks to show the fees that you had to pay to form your business. Because I'm looking for, what fees were you required to pay? Who did you pay them to? What was it for? The amount, that kind of stuff. And so the easiest way I think to illustrate that is like a little, in your Microsoft Word or whatever software you're using, to just use a fake little rectangle clip art check, and then you can fill it in that way.
Okay. And so for those 3 that you just named, those can be like 3 separate pages itself.
No, you can put 3 checks on one page. It's fine.
3
I just
checks on one page.
would think like
Okay.
a page dedicated to that check information.
Okay. And I don't know if you could tell me like what else would you be looking for like on the things. So like I guess to get to like the 8 to 12, I know like
I guess it kind of depends on what type of entity you're looking at. Like, do you have an idea of what you think you want to form?
yeah, it's like a digital marketing agency, like LLC.
Okay,
Or-
so an LLC. That's what I was
Yeah.
getting, was like what entity type, LLC, corporation, whatever. Okay, so for an LLC, for all the projects, I'm looking for you to have like a cover letter, a checks page showing the fees you paid, and then like meeting minutes, like a record of your first organizational meeting. And then every kind of business, whatever entity you're forming, you're going to need a governing document. The governing document is going to be different depending on, if you're forming an LLC or you're forming a corporation. So for an LLC, the governing document is called the operating agreement. So that would be another example of a document that you would create yourself using what you learned in the textbook. So like, for example, when you're in your textbook, you'll do the online textbook, probably not all of you have paper books, but you'll go to chapter 17. And in chapter 17-2, there's a section that's called the LLC operating agreement. And it gives you, typical provisions that would be included in that. And those half a dozen topics would be what you'd include. And that's the stuff you'd address in the operating agreement that you're writing yourself. And then you want to make sure that you have, a line at the bottom that says like this agreement was executed on this date, and then the signature of like you as the member and whatever other members you have. Because it's going to be the kind of the contract between you and the business of how you're going to run the business.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. And then the same kind of idea if you were like a corporation, for example, it's just your governing document would be bylaws instead.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that was my main questions right there that I just need answer.
Okay. Anybody else? Welcome those of you that just joined us. Do y'all have any questions or anything you wanted to ask?
I have a question
Okay.
about the meeting minutes document. What needs to be included on that?
That is just having you guys go through the motions of keeping formal business records. One thing that is kind of a challenge that I've seen in like my law practice is with small business owners, they have a tendency to not always feel like there's a need to go through those formal business record keeping motions or those kind of things. And what I want for you as students is to help you understand the importance of strengthening that bubble of protection for liability that's around you. So having you keep a record of meetings when it's just you or maybe you and a partner in real life might feel kind of silly, but in real life, that could be the evidence that helps protect you against someone piercing your corporate veil. And so for your meeting minutes for the project, it would be your first ever organizational meeting. So I'm looking for, just one page of your project that says, I, like Haley, met, with my partner by myself or whatever on this date and time, this place, and I decided to do whatever you decided to do. So like typically if it's your first meeting, one thing that might be on the order of business would be like adopt your operating agreement if you're an LLC or, your bylaws or that kind of thing if you're a corporation. So it would be that first step in like organizing your business. Maybe you decide you want to get a website or you decide you want to rent some shared workspace or something like that. But it doesn't have to be anything really complicated, like, a few bullet points, a paragraph, maybe. That's it.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
That was my main question.
Okay. Anybody else have any specific questions? Okay, I see in the chat room, somebody posted, is there an official form for the organizational meeting? There's not. There's not a form you need to use. It's just about you going through the motions of making a record of that meeting. So I'm just looking for, a few details that make sense for your very first business meeting. A date, a time, place, that kind of thing. And then that you somehow signed it at the bottom, acknowledging that this is a record that you made or that someone else made and you approve of as, an accurate reflection of whatever happened at that meeting. Okay, so I have a couple questions from live in the room. Okay.
That's the IRS form. This isn't the SS4 form, which I did.
Yes, the EIN application is called the SS4. So
Okay.
the IRS gives like alphanumeric
Right.
codes to some of their forms. So that form is called the SS4. And so you'll want the PDF version. So anybody who's online, the question was about how to apply for an EIN. That's something I want everybody to do, whether you're an LLC or corporation or whatever. And the EIN application from the IRS website is the one document from the IRS website that everyone should have as part of their project. And it's called the SS4 form. It's available as a PDF on the IRS website, but it's also as a separate PDF, the instructions are available. So make sure you download both the form and the form's instructions because sometimes federal government forms can be a little bit tricky and the instructions will help you to complete it properly.
So this one is the right transition.
Uh-huh.
Arrivals of organization building.
Yeah, that's the, yeah.
So this is the right one. Do we need?
Mhm.
Okay, so we just need to change, make sure we put LLC in the title.
Yeah.
Got on this one. Cool.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
How's on Wednesday?
Mhm. It's a drop-in Zoom on Thursday too.
Do you want to the library? And, work on this? I'll give you class time.
Okay.
When would it be? We appreciate it.
Oh.
We've been in the library sometimes. We're about what forms we need.
No problem. Y'all have a good day. I guess we can always close it to not have noise from the hallway. Thanks, guys. Sorry about that. I'm in my office, and so I had some drop by questions in person as well as those of you that have joined us on the Zoom call. Does anybody else have any other specific questions? Let's see, we talked about the IRS form to get your EIN application. The Secretary of State has fillable forms too that you'll want to include depending on what type of entity you're forming. You'll find those forms on the LLC, like for example, LLC forms for the Secretary of State's website. Okay, I see something else in the chat. So for the cover letter, can you just fill in the blanks? You can use the cover letter however you would like. So the cover letter has a lot of blanks all over it just because those are sections that you should fill out relative to like your business. You can use as much of it or as little as you like, but some of the stuff in the cover letter may not match your business. You know, if you're not, I don't remember what my fake business was in the cover letter, but it was like a marketing firm or a consulting business or something. You know, if that doesn't apply to the business you're forming, then you'd want to change that to be more applicable to what you're actually creating. But, you know, the blanks are just there so that you can write whatever you want to write there. Just because you see 2 blanks or 3 blanks or 4 blanks doesn't mean there's 2, 3, or 4 specific answers for those blanks. What you put in the cover letter is going to be different depending on what kind of business you're creating, what type of entity you're forming. So it's just there to kind of guide you. I wanted you guys to spend your energy on researching, you know, the pros and cons of all these different entity types so you make a really good choice that is easy to form and provides protection from liability, because this is a business law class. So that's what you're demonstrating that you're learning in these chapters. But I didn't need for anybody to really stress and worry about how to put together a letter or what the letter should say or something like that. And so that's why I just gave you a sample so you kind of had an idea of what kind of things you could put in that cover letter. And then welcome to those of you who just joined us. Do y'all have any questions for me?
I have a question about an annual registration. I think I saw that for an LLC, Georgia required that.
Yes, so Georgia requires that fee paid every year for an LLC. And so the way you demonstrate to me on the project that you know that fee is required for your business is on your checks page. So you're going to have one page of your document that you turn in for your project reflect, you know, the financial costs of forming a business. And so for an LLC, using that example, I keep coming back to LLC examples because LLC is a very popular choice for this project. And if you've read through all 3 chapters, you understand why it's a popular choice for the project. It just is a very popular choice in real life, honestly. And for an LLC, for example, there's 3 fees that I'm looking for on your checks page. And so one of them would be your annual registration fee, you know, written into like a fake, you know, clip art check or something like that. There's no corresponding document for the annual registration, so don't stress about that. In real life, the state of Georgia just sort of spits out almost kind of like a receipt type bill that would be automatically generated. So I don't need you to go through any, you know, hassle of creating a fake, you know, annual registration form because it's automatic online on their website. Does that make sense? So I'm just looking for that fee to show me that you know that it's something that you need to include.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Shayla posted in the chat about choosing the entity type. So you can have 2 people in lots of different entity types. For example, you could have a partnership, a general partnership. You could have a limited partnership. You could have two people that share ownership as members of an LLC. Same thing with corporation. They're the two, shareholders. But when you're trying to decide entity type, if you look at the grading rubric, choice of entity is 20% of your grade. So that's 2-letter grades right off the bat that could be easily earned by picking an entity that provides you good liability protection, or you could lose a big chunk of that by making a choice that doesn't provide protection. So walking through those options, let's take, I don't know, pick 3 options, Shayla, and we'll work through those kind of options on what 2 people could be. I see limited partner, partnership, and then what else? Maybe LLC. Does that work? Okay, we'll go with those 3. So for example, if you have a partnership, general partnership, there are both partners that have equal, liability in that partnership. And so for this academic exercise, a general partnership is not your best choice because you leave yourself vulnerable to liability for your mistakes, personal liability for your mistakes, not just the business liability. Of course, the business is going to be liable, but the business is liable and you're personally liable, but you also have liability for your partner. So the general partner has individual personal liability, the business has liability, and they're liable for mistakes and behaviors of the partner that they have no control over. So that leaves you the most wide open for liability. So that makes it probably the least desirable choice of those 3. And then you have a limited partner situation. Well, one thing that's important to recognize with a limited partnership is you still have to have someone be the general partner. So one person is protected from liability, but the other person is not. So if that was the case in this project with 2 people that are forming a limited partnership, in order to not lose some of those points for entity choice, I would need a little bit of an explanation, like in your cover letter, about why a limited partnership was a good choice for your fake business. What justification do you have for one, group member to have full exposure for liability as the general partner and the other group member to be protected as the limited partner? Does that make sense? Like there are some situations where someone might want that, in a business arrangement, but for our project, you explaining why you want that arrangement shows me that you understood that was the case. Because otherwise I would assume that maybe you didn't realize that in a limited partnership, somebody is still the general partner and someone's a limited partner, and you may not have properly applied what you learned in this textbook material to the project. So then that leaves the third option of doing a 2-member LLC. And so this is the best of those 3 choices because as an LLC, the LLC is a separate legal entity, and it gives both partners protection from personal liability. But because of the type of entity it is, it's kind of got this hybrid benefits of simpler taxation, flow through taxation, those kind of things that give you the benefits of like a partnership, but the protection of traditional corporation. So does that answer your question? Okay. I'm glad I have that. Anybody else have any other questions? Sometimes as I answer someone else's question, it can, trigger other questions for those of you thinking different things. Yeah, you can ask questions about a specific line on a form. Which form are you looking at, Michael? Okay, do you want to show me your transmittal or something? I don't have one right in front of me. I guess I could, let me see if I can open up. Corporations division, another screen. Okay. Can you guys see the screen that I'm sharing now? I can't see the chat box anymore, so I definitely need somebody to say that whether
Yes.
I can see. Okay. Okay, so the transmittal form, I think is what you'd asked about, Michael. For the, was it Michael, was it for the LLC? Is that the transmittal form you're looking at?
He said yes in the chat
Okay.
box.
Okay. Okay, so on this transmittal form, line 5 is the name and address of each person that's organizing the LLC. So for an LLC, the owner is the member. The organizer is the person who is putting the stuff together to apply. So as a member, you can be the organizer, but just because you're the organizer doesn't necessarily mean you're the member. So for this form, yeah, you would put your name in there for, as the organizer of the LLC. But when you're indicating like your capacity for signing a document, for example, you want to use the role that you have that has the most authority. So if you're signing, for example, the articles of organization for an LLC, and it has, right below your name, you want to indicate what capacity you are as the signer. You want to indicate that you're the member because that shows you're the owner of the LLC. Okay, and let's see. So that answers your other question too, I guess. So you're both member and organizer. So yes, you are member and organizer, but member is a higher authority role because that shows that you're the owner of the LLC and not an organizer who is paid just to file this paperwork with the state.
When should this particular form be like submitted? Would you say like after the operating agreement? Probably.
Yeah, like for your project, whatever, it can be in any of that order. It would just be like after the cover letter, probably. And I would think the first form after that might be like your name reservation, because that would be the first step. You'd reserve your name before you'd file all this other stuff. But honestly, I'm not going to take like a lot of points off if, this form is in front of that form or vice versa. When you're filing stuff with the Secretary of State, your transmittal form and your articles of organization will be filed together with one filing fee. Your name reservation would be filed ahead of that with its own kind of fee. Annual registration would be the last fee that would kind of come into play. Your operating agreement is your governing document. It's that contract between the owners of the business and the business on how the business is going to be run. So, that's going to be somewhere in there, maybe right before or after those forms from the Secretary of State. And then of course, EIN application could come again before or after that stuff. These forms have room where you could put your EIN number if you have one already assigned. And then even on the SS4 EIN application itself, it has a section where you can put an EIN number, which obviously you wouldn't have one because you're just applying for one initially. That kind of stuff. And then, towards the end of your project is where I'd expect to see like your meeting minutes from your first organizational meeting, because that's kind of the end of our timeline. Our timeline is just that little sliver of time of forming your business. So you wouldn't include anything on this project for income tax documents, for example. That's further down the timeline. Other kinds of forms from other government websites are unnecessary. That's why I kind of limited your instructions to only these specific websites, because that narrows the focus of what you're having to include for your project. So when you're looking at, to look at it, for example, a different section on the Secretary of State's website, while we're talking about LLCs, this document right here, if you guys can see it, where it's called the filing procedures for forming a Georgia limited liability company. this document is really useful. It helps you walk through specifically the forms for the Secretary of State's website that you'd want to include to form your business. So, you know, the first thing you see in bold is name reservation. And then below that, prepare your articles of organization, your transmittal form. So this kind of also gives you a, you know, potential order that you could put some of those forms in. If for the articles, this is an example right here of what articles could look like, or you can use the fillable form that's available on the website as well. And then at the bottom, it says other important information for LLCs. Well, the first bullet point is an IRS website. That's a website that's included in your project. So that should indicate to you, okay, that's a form that I should turn in with this project. The other two websites that are listed right here, you know, about the Department of Labor or the Georgia Department of Revenue, those are not websites that were listed on the instructions for the project. So you can safely ignore those because there's no way I would ask for anything on this project that came from a website that I didn't authorize you to use. Does that make sense? So that hopefully will help keep the focus on the project narrowed down into exactly what I'm looking for.
Do you know what that website's supposed to pull up? It won't let me pull up anything when I click on it. That
Your
first.
the website from your course done link for the Secretary of State should have sent you here. Is that link not working right now?
It was a link from the filing procedure. You were just on the.
Oh, even if the link doesn't work, you can just go to the IRS website itself and search for EIN application.
Okay, so is that the only thing that we need from that website if we're doing LLC?
From the IRS? Yeah, that's the only
Yeah.
thing you have to have from the IRS. You like there's optional forms from the IRS that you can submit, you know, for like how you want to be taxed, you know, that kind of thing. But those wouldn't necessarily like they're not required for that. So if someone turns those in, you know, I'm not going to count off for them, including something extra that's optional, but it's also not going to cost them points if they filled out an optional form incorrectly. Does that make sense? So the things that I'm really looking for your grade are the requirements for this project that I'm holding everybody kind of to that same standard for. So if someone turns in extra stuff, like maybe they're on the Secretary of State's website and they want to register a trademark or something like that, you know, like if they missed something else they were supposed to have, maybe that can help offset some of those points, but it's not the kind of thing that you have to have for this project. It's not something that's required. The things that I'm having you do for this project are, you know, the basic filing procedures that the Secretary of State indicates, in addition to, you know, showing that you can keep business records, those formal business records, which, like I was saying earlier, are something that I've seen in real life are challenging for small business owners to kind of keep up with because they don't always see the point until maybe they get sued and somebody's trying to pierce that corporate veil. And then all of a sudden they wish they had done a better job of keeping good records and good financial records that are separate from their personal stuff in order to separate and maintain that kind of bubble of protection around them against personal liability. Okay, so I see a couple new questions in the chat box. Okay, so Michael, did I answer your question? If you're the LLC, you are both member and organizer, but member is, you know, the higher, more authoritative role. And so when you're indicating your capacity for signing stuff, you want to sign it as a member of the LLC. But when they're looking for who put this together, like or calling you the organizer on that transmittal form, that's also you. Okay, so, and then Angie, that form I was just showing you, the filing procedures is a good place to start with your LLC paperwork. Okay, and then I see the question from Sid, and I can't really answer that question without knowing what kind of entity you're forming. So are you forming an LLC, or are you forming a partnership? Or are you forming a corporation? Like, what kind of entity are you forming? Yes, Michael, a member can be the organizer, but an organizer is not necessarily always going to be a member. It can be someone who is hired to organize the LLC for them. And then for the registered agent, for that line on the form, you can make up a fake registered agent if you want, or just put your own contact information for that's the point of a registered agent is like if someone's trying to send official paperwork or maybe get someone served or something, that would be the representative that would be contacted on behalf of that business. Yes, Haley, everybody is going to need to turn in a name reservation form. That's one of those things that's like the cover letter, the checks page, the meeting minutes, and the name reservation. No matter what type of entity you're forming, those are documents that everybody's going to be submitting, whether they're an LLC or a corporation or whatever. Okay, so I see, okay, Sid responded to my question. So you were forming an LLC, then you would not have a partnership agreement. So partnership agreement would be the governing document if you were forming a partnership. For a LLC, your governing document is your operating agreement, and that's the document that you are creating yourself to show me that you can apply what you learned in chapter 17. So if you are, by yourself forming a single member LLC, or if you have a partner or two and you're, 2 or 3 member LLC, whatever you're deciding to form, you will draft your own operating agreement using what you learned in your textbook. And that was one thing I have this paper book out because I was showing it to the students that were in my office a second ago. And you can't really see it on the video. I don't know why I'm even holding it up, but in chapter 17-2C, there's a section in your textbook that's called the LLC operating agreement, and it gives you 6 provisions that are typical topics covered in an LLC operating agreement. So what you would do is you would take that section of your textbook and use it as like a recipe, for lack of a better term, to generate content for your own personal operating agreement for your own business that you're doing, like how, the topics are management. So you would have, a title that says operating agreement of, whatever the name of your business LLC is. I didn't give a page number. I mean, the paper version I have right now, it's like page 376, but the important thing is to go to 17-2. So did you get that, Shayla? 17-2, letter C in this book is the LLC operating agreement section, and it'll give you those 6 provisions on how to write your own LLC. So you'll, want to title it that this is the operating agreement, name your business, and then you'll number the paragraphs. So it could be like paragraph 1, management, or it could say article 1, management. And then you write a few sentences on how it's going to be managed. You're the owner. Are you the manager? Are you going to hire a manager? How's that going to work? Or whatever these different topics they suggest, how you're going to deal with profits, how's profits going to be divided and retained and that kind of stuff. And then at the very end, you'll want to have a sentence kind of like the articles of organization or any of the documents you create, where you have a sentence that's like, this document was executed on this date, put the date that it becomes official, for pretend official for your project. And then a signature section where you have your signature, your printed name, and then you indicate your capacity of the signer. Anything you do from the cover letter to your governing document, even your meeting minutes, you want those things dated and signed because you're creating, it's pretend, it's an academic exercise, but essentially you're creating legally binding documents for this business you're forming for pretend. And so by signing and dating things, you're showing the world when they look at that you had the authority to bind the company in this way, or to make the record that reflects this meeting, or reflects these financial transactions, or executed this contract between you and the business on how you're going to run the business, that kind of thing.
With those signatures, do we just like, if my partner and I would just put member under our names,
Mhm.
correct? If we're all
You-
members.
Yeah, you put member, but you also want to put member of whatever the name of your business is. So it, just says to the world, like, I'm the owner of this business. It tells them what your role is, your position. And then for signatures, this is just a project. So like you can just use a font that looks like a handwriting font if you want. You can use your mouse and like draw a fake signature, anything like that on these documents you create. I mean, if you want to print them, sign them, and then scan them back with your cell phone, you can do that too.
Is there a certain document that you'd like us that like where we state if we're member managed or manager managed for an LLC?
No. I mean, you will address that kind of stuff when you write your operating agreement, when you talk about how it's going to be managed, but it's not important to like call it member managed or manager managed, like in your cover letter or anything like that. Okay, I see a question pop up in the text box. Okay, so somebody in the text box asked about for an LLC bylaws, and there aren't bylaws in an LLC. Bylaws are in a corporation. That's the governing document for a corporation. The governing document for an LLC is your operating agreement. They serve the same kind of purpose, showing how the business will be run. And there's not a minimum number of pages to answer that question, Shayla, but it's about having all the required documents. So for example, you're writing your own operating agreement, your own cover letter, your own meeting minutes, like those typically are going to be, a page, but it might be 2 pages depending on what you have to say. I want these things to start on new pages. So it's like, it could be a minimum of 1 page per document, but some of these documents might be a couple of pages. None of the documents that you're creating would be more than that, more than a page or 2. But the whole project itself is probably going to be like, maybe 8 to 12 pages total. Does that help get you kind of in the ballpark? Okay. And so Sid, also don't forget all those forms from the Secretary of State's website and the one form you're looking for the IRS website. So you listed all the documents you're creating yourself. But remember, when you are doing an LLC or whatever you're doing, when you look at the filing instructions, that gives you the minimum number of forms for the Secretary of State's website you'd want to include. So in addition to the name reservation, you've got the articles of organization and the transmittal form to the Secretary of State. And then you've also got that EIN application to the IRS. And those would all be included as part of your final project pages.
Anybody have any other questions, or do you want me to pull up anything else on IRS website or Secretary of State's website or Corsten? I've kind of addressed it in the correspondence last night, but what I want to make sure is that you guys do read the directions and you understand that, I've limited the scope of your project by telling you what websites to go to. So when it comes to things like an operating agreement or bylaws, you're writing those things yourself. You're not looking them up on Google or downloading a version of those documents from LegalZoom or Northwest Registered Agent or any of these other websites that are willing to sell people templates for these kind of documents, because it's important for this, academic exercise that you go through the motions of creating a document based on what you're learning in your textbook to apply what you've learned. And hopefully this project, as opposed to a test, is a more fun way to learn these concepts and apply what you learn. And my goal for you guys, of course, is to always have things be a learning opportunity that can help with real life. So if you are in a position where you have an idea and you want to start a business, or you've got kind of an entrepreneurial nature to you or something, that I hope this project is kind of empowering and showing you that when it comes to the basics of forming your own small business, that you are capable of doing those basics in a way that can protect you personally from liability, that you're not limited to only forming the simple small business entities that a lot of people form when they create a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, that you can do better than that. And you can go online. You don't have to hire a lawyer to do it for you, that you can do the basics yourself. Of course, once you start being successful and making lots of money, you definitely want to seek the advice of, lawyers and accountants and professionals that can help you protect your business and grow it in a way that is best for you. But in those very beginning stages, when you don't have, you have a great idea, but you maybe don't have a lot of money to hire all those extra professionals, being able to do some of these things yourself in a way that protects you, I'm hoping is going to be empowering to you in the future. I don't think there's really any forms we haven't talked about for LLCs specifically. We talked about the 3 forms that an LLC would need from the Secretary of State's website: in name reservation, articles of organization, and your transmittal form. Along with that, we talked about the fees that I'm looking for, and the registration fee is also on that same filing instruction form, but I'm not looking for a corresponding document. I just want you to show me the fake check to know that you understand that that's a fee that you would be required to pay. And then, your filing fee and your fee to reserve your name would be other fees you'd have. And then the only other government form would be that EIN application to apply for an employer identification number. And then beyond that, we talked about all the ones documents I want you to create yourself, like the financial document would be your checks page showing the fees that you would need to pay. Meeting minutes from your first organizational meeting showing that you keep business records and you keep a record of all the decisions that were made and things that were accomplished. A cover letter introducing your project, that should definitely be page 1. The rest of them, if they're completely mixed up and scattered, that doesn't make logical sense. But as far as an order to put them in, there's not really a specific order that I'm looking for any of that kind of stuff. And then of course the big governing document is where you really show that you can take something that you're learning in theory from your textbook and translate it into application and apply it to this pretend business that you're creating for the project, and use those concepts to make decisions on how you're going to manage it, what your profit's going to be distributed, that kind of thing. So hopefully that covered all your questions, all your stuff, Gwen, right? Did I get everything in my summary?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Y'all have any other questions? I guess one thing I could address right now, while I don't see any questions in the chat box, is LLCs are a very popular choice for this project, but so are corporations. And so if you're forming a corporation for your
business entity. There's also a separate doc on the Secretary of State's websites for corporations that does similar to that one I just showed you for LLCs. It kind of takes you through those basic steps of forms you need to include, because corporations have a different structure. And one thing that's important to recognize for a corporation is that you'd be required to post notice to incorporate in your local legal organ. And so that's something else I'd be looking for on the project if you're doing a corporation, is the newspaper notice and the corresponding fee for that. And then of course the governing document's a little different. It's, the bylaws or your governing document incorporation instead of an operating agreement. And then articles of incorporation instead of articles of organization, that kind of thing. So there's subtle differences, but there are definite differences in the structure of what your project's going to look like, what you turn in. Did that answer most of y'all's questions? Anybody else have anything else they want to ask about? Resources for combining PDF documents. Okay, so if you take all the documents you created yourself, like in Word, you save those as a PDF. And then the PDF documents you filled out, you either saved the filled in PDFs, or you can, if you want to separate the pages, an easy way to do that would be to use your print button on your computer and just do print to PDF. That'll save it as a PDF file. And then you can use, there's plugins for Google Docs and things that you can find online that are PDF merging software. You don't have to have a fancy level of Adobe or anything to do that. There's other less expensive ways to merge PDFs into one combined document. And so that's the high-tech way, I guess, to combine them all. An alternative way that is more low-tech, if you have access to a printer or you come to campus to print them, would be to print your final versions of all these documents and then scan them together using either a scanner or using your cell phone to take, because almost all cell phones have scanning software built into them. I know all iPhones do, and I've heard that Androids do as well. And then you can just take pictures of each page to scan it into a PDF that way. Or the third alternative would be to, as you're creating your project in a Google Doc or in a Microsoft Word document, you take a screen capture, like a screen print image of the completed PDF form, like one of the government forms. They're all, all the most common ones, unless you're forming like a nonprofit and you're seeking, the 501c3 stuff. Everything else is all one page. And so you'll take the form that you've completed and adjust the resolution on your browser to where the whole form is shown on the one screen, and you can do a screen capture of that. So then you can paste that into your Word document, crop out the extra stuff that's not important, zoom that page out to where it fills up the whole page in your Word document. And then your final project, you just save that as a PDF. And it will freeze everything in place so that as someone's kind of thumbing through your project, every page is, full size, easy to read, and you can't tell where the pages you created, exist versus the PDF forms you made. You just put everything on a new clean page and it'll just flow right through. Okay, so I see another question about, no, you don't need food permits or anything like that. You don't need any kind of like local business license or permitting or anything from any other websites. I'm looking for just the basics to form your business entity. So you could address the next steps, like in your cover letter. You could say, the next thing we're going to do is get this license or get this, permit or whatever. That could be something you put in your meeting minutes. That could be something you address in your cover letter, either place, both places, but it's not documents that I'm looking for this project. It's like, think of it as like just outside this timeline, like it's the next thing you would do. Anybody else have questions? Well, I guess this is it. We've been on here for about an hour. I'll be back tomorrow in the evening and Thursday at the same time if you think of other questions you have. But I hope that all of you have a great rest of your day. And if you think of something else, you just have a quick question, shoot me a text or an email and I'll get back to you. Or if you have drafts you want me to look at, you can do that too. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye.
Can you see me?
Hey, Adrian.
Oh, I can't wait. Okay. Wait, talk again?
Oh, I don't think I can hear you. Let me see. Well, you know what? It's probably not you. I probably don't have my speaker turned on. Hold on.
That was my problem. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you now. Yeah, for some reason my computer thought that my microphone was my speaker.
No worries, no worries. First and foremost, it is nice to actually meet you. I feel like the online class is interesting, like the dynamic, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's nice to meet you. My name is Adrian.
I'm glad you could jump on with our call today. Like, I really do miss that connection that you don't get with online classes. But at the same time, I get why they're so popular nowadays, because after COVID, like the flexibility it gives, like it's an efficient
It's kind of a win-lose.
Yeah.
My question is really just like, well, can I ask or should we wait?
Oh yeah, go ahead and ask. This is just like a drop-in kind of
Okay.
thing. And then I have the daytime ones and the evening one for people that couldn't do the daytime ones. So
Heard. Okay, well, my question is like, so my idea is like a coffee shop. I'm gonna do a little coffee shop, it's like just me, no partners or anything. So I'm thinking LLC, and I'm thinking like you don't have to like confirm or deny, and I know that's kind of cheating.
no, I'm saying like that's a great choice. LLC is a great choice. I leave the whole thing open to whatever kind you want to do, but the idea is that as you learn about all the different kinds in 3 chapters, you're like, okay, these are no good because they don't protect me enough. This one's not good because it's too complicated.
Right.
And sort of filter it down to like,
I don't want someone to come in and get like burnt by hot coffee and then sue me. You know what I mean?
Right.
I am not the store. But my question is like, okay, so I've started going through all of the resources that are like on Courston and everything, like the Georgia website, the IRS website, and like I'm finding the documents that it says that I need and stuff. But I'm a little confused. Like, should I make my own version of these documents or like print out their blank sheets, or like how do I submit?
Okay, you could do sort of both. So like when you are on the Courston website,
I have some specific things like in the instructions or in the like the combined PowerPoint, like when you're going through the PowerPoint that's all the chapters together, like every once in a while you get to like the red slides, like for your project, do this, for your project, do that on the PowerPoint slides. But also when you go to the Secretary of State's website, there's one really helpful document to get you started, and it's called the filing procedures for limited liability companies. Did you find that document?
Yes, the little drop down thingy.
It's like a 2-page PDF. I can share my
Oh.
screen. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let me open up my browser.
I might have it still. No, I do not.
Okay. Oh, I didn't share my screen. I went to the website, but I didn't share my screen with you. So
No worries. You're all good.
Okay. So you can see my screen now, right?
Also, my puppy is very like bouncy today. She has the zooms. Please ignore.
Oh, okay. That's no problem.
Yes, I see the screen.
Okay, so this is like when you're on the Secretary of State's website, when you follow my link, there's a button that just says forms, and it'll take you to this list of all the forms for the Secretary of State. Have you been here before?
No, I've not
Okay.
seen this one.
Okay, this document is really, really useful where it says filing procedure for a limited liability company.
Mhm.
So hopefully it'll follow you. Okay. Or it'll follow my click. You can see the new document, right? Okay.
Mhm.
So in this document, it gives you what like the minimum requirements for Georgia. So
Yeah.
for our project, I have some extra requirements like a cover letter, and then I want you to give me like your meeting minutes from your first meeting and like your checks page, so your financials. Those two documents are really to try to get you in the good habit of keeping business records. One thing I experienced in real life as an attorney is that so many small business owners really blur the boundaries between who they are as an individual and who the business is. So asking you to do those formalities kind of put you there in the whole keeping it separate, making the
Right.
separate legal entity. So in addition to this stuff, I want that. And then I've also asked for like a governing document. So as you learn about these business entity types, you will learn that the governing document for an LLC is an operating agreement. The governing document for a corporation, for example, is bylaws. So those are the extra things I'm asking you to do. But the very, very minimum, all of that is right here in this page right here. So like a name reservation is, this first heading, articles of organization are the second heading, transmittal information form is the third heading, and then it talks about annual registration fee in the fourth heading. So your 3 fees for the Secretary of State are right here. $25 for this form, $100 to file your articles and your transmittal, $50 annual registration. Boom, there's your 3 checks for the checks page,
And for the check page, kind of the same thing. Like, would you rather just have like a bulleted list saying like this amount is going to so and so for this, or like should I print out like a template of a check and like?
It's usually easiest to do just a clip art template like of a check, because that way you don't forget a detail. Because like I'm looking for who did you pay, how much did you pay, what was it for, that kind of stuff. And so sometimes if you're making a bulleted list, it may not be clear like what that was for or who it was to. But with a clip art check, it's just easy to just kind of fill that out like that.
I also thought maybe like an Excel spreadsheet type of thing.
That would work too. Yeah. I mean, there's only the 3 fees that I'm looking for, so it doesn't need to be super complicated. It's just 3 amounts. And then for the annual registration, I'm just looking for that fee on your checks page because you don't need a corresponding document. In real life, it spits out basically like a receipt, almost like a bill, and so that's not worth like creating one from, a fake one. But all of these things right here they talk about in this document are listed right here as fillable PDF forms. So once you know what you're looking for, you can scroll through, the templates and the forms, and you're like, oh, a name reservation. That was something on the list that I need.
Yeah.
So you click on it and you fill it out, and then you can print it, save it, combine it, whatever you're going to do, that way from the website. Those kind of things. And so those are all available here easily, found on the Secretary of State's website. The other website that is useful is the IRS, because that's where you'll find your application to get an EIN. your employee identification number. When you look at those filing instructions, at the very bottom, it's like some additional information that you might need. And it gives the suggestion of the EIN application on the IRS website, and then some other things with the Department of Labor and Department of Revenue websites. Well, those aren't websites I gave you to use, so you can safely ignore those, because that's also why I limit, like I'm very specific, like only use these resources, because it helps keep things condensed down to a very specific thing that I'm looking for. By giving all my students the option to do whatever kind of entity they want to create, you know, you can imagine like how big that could get, and it's hard to grade everybody objectively with each other unless we're all doing kind of the same sort of steps. So if someone's doing a corporation, their project will look different than someone who's doing LLC, which will look different than someone who's doing like a partnership, any of those kind of things. But the reality is that, you know, by keeping it kind of focused on, I'm looking for a cover letter, I'm looking for these basic forms for the state of Georgia, this one form from the IRS, checks page, governing document, meeting minutes, like it keeps it kind of parallel for all the different types.
Okay. For the meeting minutes, who exactly would that involve? Like it would be like me and then who I'm speaking to for like the proposal, right? But like, is it just those?
It could involve whoever makes sense for you. So even if you were by yourself, like if you're you know, a single owner of a business and you're a single member LLC, you might be the only one there. And so in that case, it feels even more awkward, right, to make notes and keep a record, but that even makes it more important, because if you get sued and you're trying to show all the ways that you've maintained a business separate from you, that becomes really important as evidence that these are the business's records. This is what happened on this date. This is when this meeting occurred. Like you're showing that you did all those formalities in order to like reinforce that bubble of protection to keep you, you know, safe from someone piercing that corporate veil.
I'm so sorry. I feel like I have 75 questions.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so on the budget end of it, like the checks page, does this need to include like I'm doing the coffee shop, right? Does this need to include, you know, like the buying the property or like the equipment?
It doesn't have to. The things I'm looking for are the fees associated with forming it. So as you come across like a, you know, government requirement form and it has a filing fee attached or something like that, you know, you'd want to put that fee on your checks page.
So this is just like the hypothetical business, not so much like actually starting the business.
Right. This is just the very, very initial phase. Like you have an idea and you want to make it real. And this is the very first thing you're going to do from a legal perspective. So like there's other classes you'll take, you know, as a business student in college, you know, where you work on business plans and you work on different kinds of those steps, maybe marketing plans, whatever kind of class you're in. But for just the basic legal environment angle that I'm taking is, you know, what is the approach from a legal perspective to turn your idea into something more concrete that's going to give you personal protection from liability and, you know, set up and create this legal entity.
Okay. Heard. Honestly, I feel like that was really it.
Yeah. And so the one document that I also want to, you know, just throw out there as a cautionary tale, there's not a form for your governing document, your operating agreement, which is, that would be for your LLC. So that's the one document where you're taking what you learned in the book and you're applying it to your idea. So you go into your textbook in chapter 17, that's the LLC chapter. It's 17-2. I can't remember the letter. I think maybe C, 17-2C, B, one of those sections is 17-2. And that section is called, you know, the LLC operating agreement. And it'll give you half a dozen typical provisions. You know, like these are the topics that are usually covered in operating agreement, things like management, profits, how do you deal with, you know, dissolving the company or selling the company, like those kind of things. And so what you'll do is you'll create your own document instead of downloading like, you know, a 30-page version from LegalZoom or something that someone else created that's going to be flagged for plagiarism. It's your opportunity to show me you can take this theoretical knowledge from your book and apply it to your business and create this document. And so I'm looking for things like, does it have a title? You know, did you include the topic suggested from your book? Did you execute it? Like, did you give it a date and a signature? Like, does your signature show the capacity of the signer? Like, you want to sign it not just with your name, but like your name as the member of the LLC. That shows the world you had authority to execute that document. You're not just a random person holding a paper, you know, like it really sends that message out there. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for.
Okay. Well, cool. Honestly, I think that was it for me. So I really appreciate it. I feel 10 times better.
Well, good. I'm glad it was worth jumping on the Zoom call then.
All right. Well, thank you so much. You have a good day.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.